morning, world. This is Steve Rao on Pod TV's World Edition. And on World Edition, we bring you news from around the world, talk about innovation, and continue our discussion on how we can get through this pandemic, both in the United States and around the world. A pandemic that seems to be never ending, now with the Omicron variant and the current surge in many nations in the world, including the United States of America. Today, my commentary is based on presidential approvals and the unpopularity of Joe Biden as we get ready for our favorite show next week, tomorrow, the WOT, the worst president of the United States. The worst of all time. Well, first of all, I'm going to base my monologue on just paraphrasing some thoughts that were shared to us yesterday on Global Public Square by Fareed Zakaria, which I think is very interesting and will frame our discussion tomorrow. He focused in on President Biden's unapproval rating, which is down to 45%, maybe even lower. And he found it very odd that this would happen at a time when the economy is actually getting better, unemployment is down, and the stock market is going up. He brought up two very important points that I think would be interesting for us to observe today. He actually used the word accidental president. He cited the fact that Joe Biden actually won the presidency because of two reasons. First, President Barack Obama, the fact that he selected Joe Biden to be his vice president, and Biden was able to serve as the VP for 8 years. This gave him a significant advantage in the Democratic primaries. And the second reason being Donald Trump. And everything that was going on just made it all the easier for Joe Biden to rally both Democrat base and independents and shift the Electoral College back to a blue map for the presidency of the United States. Now, what's interesting is if you looked at presidents who have been very successful, he's noticed that presidents, first of all, who are very charismatic, they come in as outsiders like JFK or Barack Obama. They just came out of nowhere and they won the presidency because of their inspiring speeches and their charisma. Or you have Southerners like Jimmy Carter or Lyndon Johnson, who just basically won the South but built that bridge between the North and South so they could be viable in the Electoral College. And then you've got President Bill Clinton, who has the highest approval rating of any president at 55.1%. Now, President Clinton had a little bit of both. He had the charisma. He ran as an outsider under George H.W. Bush, but he was also from Arkansas. As a former governor of Arkansas, he was able to build that bridge, appealing to moderate Southern Democrats and also holding his own with the liberals, the progressives in the North, winning the presidency twice, despite tremendous scandals with Monica Lewinsky and other situations that he was dealing with. Now, the final thing I'll close out with is just to notice in the summer, things really started to get hot for this president. He had the Afghan pullout, which we talked about on this show, inflation, Delta, Omicron variant, and now we're seeing disruption from democracy all around the world, including here at home, where just last year there was an insurrection on the Capitol. While all of this is occurring, you have disruption of democracy in other parts of the world, an ever-increasing presence of China and Russia, and Republican-led states working hard to make sure that the outcomes of elections are different than what the voters put them in there to do. We talked about that last week. When you put it all together, the fact of the matter is this. Presidents get reelected and voters like them when there's periods of peace and prosperity, as Zakaria reminded us. There is no question that right now the American people, in my opinion, do not feel like we are at peace. Every day is a constant state of war, both around the world and even internally. The divisions that we're feeling with vaccinations versus those who are vaccinated, those who are not vaccinated, those who are masked, those who are not masked, the handling of the pandemic strategy, the Supreme Court decisions on Roe v. Wade. On every issue, any president gets elected will represent half the people, but then half the people of our country will not support that president. It's a tough time for Joe Biden, a president who in this era is a president on uncertain, unpredictable times, probably more turbulent than we've ever seen of any modern day president. We'll have this discussion tomorrow when we talk about the WOT, the worst president of all time. Now, with us today, we have Mark Lee.
How you doing, Steve? And we've also got Nick with us as well. We're going to see if any of the other gang joins us.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to take a quick break and come right back. But I wanted to bring this issue up today as we prepare to put it in perspective of the factors that we use to judge presidents. I thought Zakaria's commentary was quite insightful. that this president was an accidental president. The thing I forgot to mention in the monologue is that Joe Biden ran in 1987 at a dismal
Mhm,
performance, ran again in 2008. He was only
mhm.
4% in the Democratic primary, 1% in Iowa, and here he is president of the United States. He never was the most popular guy when he ran nationally, but became president because of Obama and because of Trump, right? But what's interesting is that the economy is doing very well, relatively speaking, but this guy's approval ratings are just going down every day. And you wonder whether this is going to be a trend we see. Whoever gets the next presidency, are we going to see a lot of one-term presidents because of how divided we are? Will the American people ever see that peace and prosperity that they're so longing for? Right?
Well, we've had several presidents that have asked and campaigned on unity, and some of them have actually tried to maintain that unity, even though they had difficulties as well. I definitely remember that that was part of the campaign pledge. I was actually involved with some of the canvassing for that of the Obama campaign. I remember it also being something of a hope, and that's actually part of the theme that he used, coming from Hope, Arkansas, that Clinton used as well. So there's definitely been a lot of this kind of unity, but it's a hard thing to have the unity and to actually pull the unity off. So, like I said, that's part of the difficulty and everything. But I do know that it's something that our political folks have wanted, and this whole pandemic is not helping it in the least bit, because we're also having people, as you just mentioned, that are truly divided, and they're even confusing a lot of the backbone of our economy. Because I was actually reading an article where even the corporations are getting a little confused as well, because in one case they're being told to have a vaccine mandate, but their employees are then finding out about court cases and they're fighting against this and the things along those lines. So that also raises an issue as well, because like I said, a lot of folks are maybe even wanting to get vaccinated, or maybe they're not wanting to not get vaccinated, depending on their views of COVID and a number of other things. But this whole labor department rules have gotten folks very confused. So a lot of the corporations are also finding that the state rules are vastly different as well. Because you might have a state like New York that is being, I think, more stringent than the federal government. But then you've got a state like Florida that is totally less stringent than the guidelines. So I'm sure that individuals, just like corporations, are very much confused, and that's just one issue that's out there in the public's eye and everything. And there's a lot of women that are out there, and a lot of them are very much about wanting to have control of their own body. And then you've got this whole thing with Roe versus Wade going on. So no matter your viewpoints on abortion and things of that nature, it still comes down to a lot of the, women's mind to it being about the control of their own body and things along those lines. And I know that that can be a political hotbed issue as well. But let's remember, they make up over 50% of the population, if I remember my math correctly and everything. And definitely, even though they got the vote later than other elements of our society, there is no doubt that women are a major voting bloc. So that's also going to be an important issue for whoever comes. And I'm still not sure who the candidate's going to be on either side when it comes to the Republican and the
Well,
Democratic side. So
I think
that's
when
another
we
thing
look at,
that's going on.
yeah, exactly. And so when we evaluate presidents before we get to other parts of the world, we're going to look at kind of, the economy, the peace and
Right.
prosperity of the time,
Mhm.
how they handle the economy, was there disruption. So I think, I'm going to have to go back and do my review tonight about what it was like with Buchanan.
Right.
You got to think about Calvin Coolidge.
Right.
They all often say after the best president was the worst president, which
Mhm.
to me shortens the list.
Right.
After Lincoln, you had you after Buchanan, you had Lincoln.
Right.
After Coolidge, you had Roosevelt,
Right.
and then of course, I wouldn't say Reagan was the best president, but Jimmy Carter, who actually went on to become the greatest ex-president. So
Mhm.
how do we factor that in tomorrow in our
Right.
discussion? A guy that's done so much at the age of 95. So I
Right.
don't think it's fair for history to judge him as a worst president when this guy has done so much for his country, so much for the world, right? And of course, our favorite, we know where Shaquille Latimer will stand on it, Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
and I'm afraid about people throwing mud at me when I go out. But
You invoked his name. He might be showing up now,
I
Steve.
think he has shown up because I see him in
I
the
mean,
green room. So
I'm
hope
seeing
he's
this
popping
guy.
up.
Oh,
Yep.
he did
oh
show up.
God, oh God.
Look at.
Well, we're gonna wait for Shaquille to join that. We're not gonna talk
Oh
about that
no.
today. We're
Oh
gonna
no.
well anyway. Before we bring our friend from down under,
Oh,
Shaquille,
he's already here. We can't get
yeah,
rid of him.
Shaquille. What I wanted to say was that we were talking about
Okay,
kind of like
I saw it. I saw what you were talking about.
yeah. So to tell me what your thoughts are about evaluating the I know where you stand with Joe Biden, and you've been saying this for a while, but popularity continues to go down. Ironically, economy, stock market's doing a little bit better, unemployment down. There are worker shortages. Do you believe that that it's just a matter of the American people uh, and the world not feeling that we're at peace, not feeling that things are normal again? Happy days are not here again, and therefore people are like, why should we have this guy in the White House?
So I'm a little bit unqualified at the moment to really talk about the US economy insofar as it affects people on the ground, just because obviously I haven't been there for such a long period of time. But it would appear, much the same as what happened under Donald Trump when the stock market started to rebound, that wasn't necessarily helping the everyday American family or the everyday American worker. And I think that that's probably still what you're seeing now. But we're also seeing a real disconnect. We haven't seen this before. We haven't seen a situation where, like at the moment, America has a labor shortage, and they've got too many workers at the same time. Too many people that are not working, or people dropping out of the workforce. It doesn't make any sense. You've got a high rate of inflation, yet the US dollar has actually gone up against a basket of currencies. As of a few days ago, there was a report from McKinsey that actually said the total net worth of China has now exceeded that of the United States, and not by a small amount, by the way,
Wow.
by a very significant amount. The United States' net worth sits at around 80 trillion. China's is at 120. So that's a really big deal. So I think there's a lot of issues that people are worried about. And of course, we talk about a lot of them on the show, that the high rates of debt, high rates of debt to GDP. I think people perceiving some of the government spending or proposed spending as being irresponsible. But to get back to actual policy as well, it's very difficult. I think if you've kind of campaigned on the idea that I'm just going to sit here and not say very much, and I'm going to win just because people don't like Donald Trump and there's a lot of negativity about Donald Trump. We're going to blame Donald Trump for the COVID, for COVID and all that sort of stuff. Then you become the president, and the COVID situation doesn't resolve. You're going to have an issue because people are going to say, "Well, I thought you were going to, I thought you were going to do this great stuff." You tell the American people that you're running as a moderate, and then you've immediately gone down very, very progressive, a very, very progressive pathway. And progressive politics is not popular amongst anybody other than progressives. The same as hard right politics is not very popular amongst anybody but the hard right conservatives. So if you say you're going to run as a moderate, you kind of have to do that. Bill Clinton did a very good job in his first election campaign because he actually ran on law and order. He said, "Look, I'm going to be the law and order president," something that Democrats had been known for the decades prior to that as being quite weak on. He came in and said, "I'm going to be the law and order president," and he cleaned up a lot of the crime. So, I think that when you've got all these things cascading, and on top of that, you've got identity politics, it's very, very hard to convince people to unify behind the idea that they are horrible people. Like, people don't generally do that. Like, nobody but like really out there sort of wildcat liberals are going to teach their children that, hey, child of mine, you are a horrible person because of the color of your skin. I mean, people just don't go for that. That's not going to unify anyone.
And you bring up a good point before we shift topics. But yesterday on Fareed Zakaria, Hillary Clinton appeared, former secretary, just wrote a book, and she did have a good point. I must say, she seemed very articulate and seemed got my wife and I wondering, is she thinking about throwing herself back in as we look at Biden maybe not running again, which would be very interesting. But she did have a good point, and I want to pick up on something Shaquille said. She said that Bill Clinton actually had a rough first 2 years and had to reshuffle the White House and made some significant changes in his policy team. And also, she likened comparisons between Obama and Bill Clinton, that they were able to get some of their legislation pushed through in that first term, which helped them. So, I think it's a matter of kind of looking at. I do think President Biden may need to look at reshuffling his foreign policy team, his domestic team. Although he's kept Jerome Powell in there, but only time will tell. But I think it's just people are very uncertain of the future, and they're getting very impatient. And
Look, Jerome Powell's position theoretically is outside of politics, but I would say I think he has to be careful, and I think that Democrats have to be careful because what they seem to be doing is they seem to be wanting to replace people that don't agree with them within their own parties with all the sort of yes people. And the problem is that when you do that and you start listening to party delegates and party room activists, is that you lose touch with the mainstream people of America. And that's the same in any country. So if you get rid of all of those people who are otherwise able to give you feedback and say, look, I don't think this is a very good idea, that's going to have long-term effects for the Democrats, as it did for the Republicans for a long period of time there, where the Republicans started listening too much to their party activists, and they ended up with candidates that were offensive to a lot of people.
It looks like the voice of Canada has arrived, but I just I want to give a quick shout out to our friends in Lithuania because they've been watching our programming and been sending it them, and they're watching it for some reason. And I don't know why people in Lithuania give a rat's rear what goes on in the United States and Canada and Australia, but apparently they do. So I wanted to say hello to our friends in Lithuania.
Well, we appreciate that, and definitely we love having the viewers from Lithuania, and I think we've still got them from Al Jazeera and a couple of other places around the world, including the BBC and a couple of other places.
Yes.
So we're glad to have those people involved.
Yep.
But I want to come to something that Shaquille just said, because I actually had the pleasure this weekend of actually I had the pleasure of doing a couple of events, one of which I know that Shaquille will probably find offensive in some sort of ways, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I attended a metaverse event, and it was an event that was going on for 3 days, and it was around NFTs and art and cryptocurrency and a number of things in that space. The gentleman that put it together, BK Han, I believe, is out of one of the Asian countries. It might be Singapore, if I'm thinking correctly, or it might even be China for all I know. But he's got a lot of artists that were there. They were showing their artwork, and they were showing, and when I say artwork, I don't mean just visual art. It was also musical artists and other types of artists as well. And one of the things that the artists kept saying was that the reason that they liked this space, the cryptocurrency space, is because it was a shift in the distribution of finances, and it was a shift in them having more control over their wealth and their money and things along those lines. So since both Sasha and Shaquille are in that financial space, I'd love to hear their answers to that, because I kept hearing this beat of a drum where they were saying that, and I remember hearing that even during Occupy, that we needed to have a shift of power and a shift of economics and things where people had greater access to what they considered their own money. So that was one of the appeals that every artist that I heard, and these were artists from all over the world, were saying that they loved, is that, by getting this money in Ethereum, and I'm not even sure what the heck Ethereum is other than it's a cryptocurrency and everything, that it was giving them greater control. So I was just wondering, to all of you, even Nick, your thoughts about this.
I have my opinion on cryptocurrency. But let's hear from Sasha, our cryptocurrency expert, before I
number one is that I've read a big article dealing with the issue of cryptocurrencies and involving Gary Kasparov, and he admitted that he has substantial holdings in Bitcoin and Ethereum. And he's preparing now his own ETF or NFT rather. And so he believes that there is a great future in cryptos. Now, it's difficult to judge because sometimes Kasparov throughout history with his predictions and so on, sometimes he was brilliant and sometimes he was just simply wrong. And it remains to be seen what is his feel on cryptocurrencies, where it will take us, but only the future will tell.
What is your thought, Shaquille? I know that you're in that millennium age range and everything, and some of the people that I was talking to were in that same kind of age range and everything, or maybe you're Gen X, but definitely they were in that same space, and they were the ones that were really excited about it. So I was just wondering your thoughts when you hear young people, particularly those in the creative space.
Well, if they're creative space, if they're in the creative space, they obviously are by definition probably not going to have a very good understanding of the intricacies of the banking system and fiat currency. Look, cryptocurrencies obviously appear to be here to stay, and if people can use them and they're happy with them, then more power to them. I personally, I would rather invest my money elsewhere, and I think one of the things is that if people are looking at a cryptocurrency as an alternative to holding currency, that is one argument. But I don't hold currency. I rarely have an awful lot of cash lying around or sitting in my bank accounts. I normally have my money in the markets or in a commodities trade or in something. So, cryptos as an alternative to currency, sure. Cryptos as an alternative to other investments. Hey, if that floats your boat, go for it. But I would prefer to be a little bit more slow and steady. And also, I'm not taking the same sort of risks today as I was taking, 10 or 15 years ago. So I don't feel like there's any need for me to dip my toe into those waters. That may well change, but that's how I feel at the moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to dip into another issue that I know Shaquille is going to.
I'm not going to talk about cryptocurrency.
No, go tell.
I'm a guy who's holding a cryptocurrency. Come on, Mark, give me a shot here. All right, let me tell you about this little thing that's purportedly worth $50,000. Okay, my basis is zero or next to nothing. In other words, I paid nothing for it. I sell it. I get $50,000. I don't report it as taxes because there's no reporting system. All right, which is a big problem for all governments. Tax evasion can take place with this little thing. Here's problem number two with this. Let's imagine I did buy it for $1,000. It's worth $50,000, or it goes up in value. Somebody sold it to me. It's a security. Where's the SEC? Why are they asleep on this? It's an investment in a enterprise with the expectation of profits derived solely by the efforts of others. If one of our broker dealers were to sell this stuff, we'd be shut down. I mean, it is a security. So what you see is an illegal security with tax evasion, not avoidance, sitting out in the international markets, and our leadership politicians, the SEC, and the U.S. government are sitting around with their fingers up their nose, not doing anything. It's totally wrong. And the thing is, someday they're going to shut it down. The only question is when. Okay, now you can move on.
No, I'm going to move on. But before I move on, I wanted to bring the point that the artists tell me, because actually I just got 500 from a good friend of mine that she just sent me 500 this morning and everything. So she sent me 500 in stock, cryptocurrency, whatever you want to call it.
And there's no 1099-Rs. I mean, come on.
Right. Exactly. But what I was going to say is that is interesting about that is that that's what the artists apparently love about it, is that they don't have to go through the whole concept of the, I'm going to bring up a company that they don't have to go through the Napsters or the Spotify or the other folks that were taking a whole lot of their money. So they feel that they can just, she can send it to me. There was another gentleman that sent me some as well, not nearly as much as she did, but they can send it to us through the mail or through the email, and it can be done electronically. They use the OpenSea format and things of that nature.
Got it. And here's the reality of it, Mark. If you receive it and later on you exchange it for cash, or you receive it and you pay somebody else with it or whatever, it moves around with no taxes taken place by the government. It's a great tax evasion mechanism. I mean, that's really what it is. It is unbelievable that the U.S. government, your friend Joe Biden, is asleep at the wheel. But it's not surprising. The guy's probably asleep all the time.
Well, I think that
if I was the president, this thing would be shut down, guys.
I think that when you say to somebody, hey, look, we need to raise some taxes. We need everybody to contribute because we need to pay for things that are going to be mutually beneficial to the community, such as roads, hospitals, and infrastructure, etc. Then people say, fair enough, that's a patriotic thing to do, and I should contribute. But when you say, look, we're going to take your money and we're just going to redistribute it just because, and we're not going to redistribute it to poor people. That's not what we're going to do. we're going to redistribute it to people based on the color of their skin or their sexuality or something else that is their identity. I think people are probably just normal human nature. They're probably going to say, you know what, I don't really want my money taken for that. And I'm going to tell you, I was reading a book, a very interesting book, and if I can just read a paragraph here, which this book explains some tax issues. Nick, come on back. You need to be back for this book, for this passage that I'm going to read.
Okay, I was just trying to even out the odds here.
So the book says this: if you are a pinko commie hippie freak who would vote the Democratic ticket if Chairman Mao was running with Lenin, this book is not for you. If you are a gun-toting, Bible-thumping, right-wing freak who would vote for the Republican ticket if Hoover was running with Calvin Coolidge, this book is not for you. However, if you're an independent thinker who is a member of either party or an independent or just plain fed up and convinced that they all lie, yet concerned about how the election will affect you directly, this book is for you. Nick, any idea
that came from?
That?
That came from Obama, Taxes, and Me. Yeah, I know. I wrote that back years ago. By the way, I've actually written. I found out 24 books. Yeah, so that's one of the many 24 books, which is actually has some good information in it. Believe it or not, I just don't promote the books, but there's a problem.
I have it here. It was the last one on Amazon Australia. So
let me tell you what the problem is, Shaquille, that we're having with our network. Okay, we're going to be going on Roku next year. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, we're going to be on a platform along with Netflix, Hulu. It'll be the P.O.D TV, the social media network, and a bunch of other ones, right? The problem is the media wants to know whether we are liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican, and I couldn't figure out where we're going to be placed at. Are we CNN, MSNBC, or we're Fox and whoever the hell heck else?
That's what makes our show beautiful, is that we're a mixture of different opinions coming together, which is lacking in journalism today.
I know that, Steve. But see, the real problem is that I'm not sure how we're supposed to be positioned, because if you're positioned toward the right, you get right viewers. You position to the left, you get left viewers. If you're a mixture, I don't know if you get any viewers. So anyway,
it's kind of like the election. You get the viewers that are the ones that determine. So we'll get a lot of viewers because I think, like Shaquille said, the vast majority of the people are actually in the middle. This will actually surprise Shaquille as well. I was actually having a conversation yesterday with some longtime friends of mine, and one of the things that we decided, or at least they decided in the course of the conversation, because I was doing more listening than talking in that particular case, was that ironically they felt that cancel culture, which I know you're really big on talking about, is impacting both groups, because they are also frustrated by cancel culture, because they were feeling like they were getting canceled on some of the things as well. And they would definitely consider themselves to be more of what you would consider progressives and things along that line. So they were definitely getting frustrated by the whole notion of cancel culture. And they were feeling that we were canceling a lot from both the left and the right.
I'm going to give you a latest thing that came out, because I subscribe to the New Republic, which is alt-right, and Mother Jones alt-left. So I read I read both sides of the equation. So Mother Jones is crying about lawsuits that actually the richest person in Idaho, Von Sloop, whatever the heck his name is, he's like what I call a weak billionaire. He's like $2 billion. He's not a super billionaire. He's like a weak grandmaster. Okay. And apparently what he did is did a slap suit. In other words, he slapped Mother Jones for articles they published. And Mother Jones is crying because they had to spend $600,000 in legal fees defending suits. Now, he's talking to a guy who spent a lot more than that on legal fees, so I'm not crying for Mother Jones, but I'm going to speak out for Mother Jones, because it's totally wrong, these crazy slap shoots. And this slap suit is coming not from the left counterculture or cancel culture, it's coming from the right. So when people want to say, hey, the cancel culture is left only, no, my friends, it's both parties. And this Mother Jones person, I'm going to try to get the CO on one of our shows where we're trying to hook up right now, the CO. But, sometimes they're going, I don't want to talk to anybody now. I'm afraid of lawsuits. So I seriously, I get that a lot. I'm afraid to be on media.
Real quickly, I
want
to bring up a couple of things. The next topic, real quickly, we got to talk about Joe Manchin. I mean, he was
President Joe Manchin.
Yeah, he said he's against the climate change and social infrastructure bill.
Oh yeah,
He's just
Oh,
saying put the single vote.
Steve, I have a poll going on right now on that crazy bill, and let me tell you what's going on. Nearly 70% of the people are against the bill. So Joe is just representing the vast majority of Americans right now who are against the social infrastructure bill. The 30% that are for it are really your hardcore Democrats, and that's about it. So this social infrastructure bill does not have a lot of support,
Well,
and that's what I'm getting.
It's amazing, and I think that President Biden, the Biden administration is saying that he didn't honor his commitments, but he's basically saying, look, I have my own reasons for not supporting it, really citing inflation, too much money coming in the economy, and this is going to be interesting to see now, what's going to happen if this guy blocks it. In terms of voting rights, he didn't really answer the question of what he's going to do on the John Lewis voting rights and voting rights legislation. But it's just interesting. And by the way, we pray for Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker, who have had breakthrough infections, COVID infections. They are sick right now, and
Elizabeth Warren is sick. Didn't she take the vaccine? Didn't she get the vaccine?
They both were vaccinated.
Both did.
That's not good. So the vaccine didn't work too well for them.
Well, we don't know, you guys. We're not scientists. I mean, it's crazy. Now I know. Sasha, is there lots of is the Omicron variant spreading a lot in Canada, or?
Yes, it is, and Ontario is getting over 3,000 new cases a day. It was down to 300 just a couple of weeks ago. Now it's expected that it will be up to 10,000 new cases every day in January, and the hospitals will be stretched to capacity. And it's a very, very serious situation in Canada. I'm not sure about other countries, more or less, but in Canada, at least here in Ontario, it's very, very it's a really terrible situation because nobody knows what's a cure for that. Nobody knows how to deal with that, how to stop this really. So I think another lockdown is going to happen anytime soon.
Steve, I have the update on the poll now. This is the 1.75 trillion. Build Back Better. 67% are against. 26% are for. 8% are not sure. This is 2,700 views and 120 votes. So it's not a full thing, but what I'm saying is you're looking at a bill that is not popular with the American public right now, and part of it is that you spend a lot of money and you don't get anything. I mean, if they said, hey, we're going to spend this money, we're going to build housing around the country, beautiful, nice housing for homeless and for our young people and stuff like that, you might get some support on that, because the United States lacks adequate housing. But that's not what this is. This is a big bloody giveaway program.
I think, in my opinion, you raise a good point. I think it's just too much all in one fell swoop.
Do you see what they're doing in China? They're building big buildings, they're building trains, and they're building housing. Okay? Trains to move people back and forth, housing for people to live, big buildings for people to work. Okay, now if Joe said, okay, this is what we're going to spend our 1.7 trillion on. We're going to build housing so everybody will have affordable housing because we were building these big houses in the sky, just like we did in China. You're going to get some support, but that's not what's going on. They're just going to hand out money and everybody's going to go home. Come on.
But
let's
Nick,
go to Russia.
Nick, but I got a question for you, and it's actually for Sasha as well. You said they were building housing, which I agree that everybody needs a house to live in. You said they were building transportation to get around and everything. Yeah. And most people want to get around at least to visit their family and everything else. You also said they were building office buildings. And, even here in this area, Durham, we've seen a rise in building such. I think that during the pandemic, there's probably been about 5 or 6 hotels that have been built. But my question to both of you is, as we're moving more and more into this digital world where more and more people are working from home and not necessarily even going to an office, and a lot of people are resisting going to an office, is this something that any country needs to do, is build more buildings of offices?
I think really more or less the big office building, it's the point of the thing. In other words, right now, the tallest building in the world was for many years the Empire State Building in New York City. The tallest building in the world right now is the Burj Dubai in Dubai. In other words, it's not in the United States. It's sitting in Dubai. And our friends at Al Jazeera get to look at it all the time, but we don't get to look at the tallest building. It's the point of national pride, Mark, that we should have the tallest building in the world in the United States of America. And rather than just take the money and give it away to people, you give them money once the hammer comes out and they start building the bloody building, or they start building the houses. In other words, you use it to build things that make a difference. When you start giving the money away, that's what they were doing in Turkey. You know what happened? Hyperinflation, country went down the toilet. That's what they did in Venezuela. You know what happened? Hyperinflation, the country went down the toilet. You know what Joe Biden's doing? Same thing, because he doesn't know any better. It's not his fault. He just doesn't have a high bandwidth. That's all. And if he did,
hold on a second.
How could he or any other progressive Democrat not know any better? Have they heard of Venezuela? Have they heard of countries?
No, they don't. They don't. Okay,
just about these places are so great where everybody's poor. I mean,
no. What happens is the United States, we're very insular. It's everything is the borders of the U.S. Nothing goes beyond it. So that you don't even bother to look at it. And then anybody who cries a story, you hand them money.
Well, if you look back at U.S. history, there was a time in the United States where people were supposed to all collectively grow the food together, and you're going to live in this wonderful American utopia.
That sounds like Russia.
And what happened was people started to starve because some people said, I'm doing all the work, the other guy's not doing any, and they started to starve. So what did America do? They said, here, you can have this bit of land, you can have that bit of land, and those who don't work don't eat.
So wait a minute. So hold on a second. I'm trying to get what Shaquille's saying. Well, first off, I got to get to something Nick said. So Nick, by your logic, Dubai is building the tallest building.
No, they already have it.
Building as well. So by that same logic and everything, then because I'm a big fan of this one, and it may shock Shaquille. So by that same logic, because we don't have a big opera house like Sydney does in Australia, so we should build a nice fancy opera house similar to what Sydney has.
No. If you would do like you'd take a page out of Trump, you'd have the biggest and best opera house, bigger than the Sydney Opera House, better than the Sydney. And I've been to the Sydney Opera House; it's pretty nice. But the best and the biggest opera house should not be in Sydney, Australia. It should be in the United States of America. Okay, and Joe needs to get behind these types of programs rather than say, I'm just going to hand out money to people who cry. That's ridiculous. So now what does the American public come back with? This is where Joe Manchin's right. 67% say, no, Joe, we're not buying this, road to nowhere. They want roads that go somewhere, if they want the money, hand them a hammer, a nail, and let's start building stuff here. And you already know this, Mark. We do not have adequate housing in the United States.
What do we? Yeah,
1.7 trillion can buy
Sasha,
a lot
Sasha
of houses.
Many months ago, when the discussion just started about $1.8 billion, trillion dollars. Sorry, I think I have asked Steve if he could demonstrate the use of proceeds, what exactly each dollar will be directed towards what. Steve didn't know the answer at that time.
Well, yeah, I have a high level. I can tell you, I can't tell you dollar for dollar, but I can tell you, I wasn't prepared to talk about that today, but just off my memory, if you look at the categories, you have about 150 billion that would go into affordable housing, 100 that would build.
Hold on, stop right there. Why then don't you break down this $1.8 trillion into what you just said, housing, 150 billion.
150 billion. Clean energy, 155 billion.
Show that, make it a separate bill, 155 billion for affordable housing, and put it to vote. And I can see. I'm sure that this one will pass by because no one in his right mind will say, no, I'm against affordable housing. Nobody can do it.
That's a good homework assignment for tomorrow. I'll come up with the breakdown for everyone. But Sasha, that's a great point. The other thing, there's also another, I think, 175 billion for healthcare. So this would be to provide healthcare, expanding Medicaid.
What is a separate bill? And I'm wondering if Joe Manchin or any other person will vote against affordable housing or affordable health.
I think, Sasha, that's exactly the point. I mean, the fact of the matter is you have to prioritize, right? in anything in life, whether it's in business, you can't just do everything at once, right? So you have to look at the needs and say, okay, how do we phase this thing out? So maybe instead of doing a 1.3 trillion all at once, you have a phased, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. So over a few years, you're making these investments, and the American people, it would make it a lot easier to justify if you're voting for example, an affordable housing bill, or you're voting for a healthcare spending bill, healthcare spending,
I don't think
right?
so. I
Climate
don't
change.
think so because this money isn't going to be spent in 1 year. It's going to be spent over the next 10 years anyway, which from a perspective of political strategy doesn't make really an awful lot of sense, because if it had a positive effect, which I don't believe it would, but if this expenditure would actually have a positive effect on the United States, by the time those effects are actually seen and felt, Joe Biden, well, the next election would have already come and gone. And I seriously doubt that Joe Biden would even still be there. So from a position of this being a good political strategy, I don't think so. And also, it's really, it's great to say, look, we're going to invest in education, or we're going to invest in healthcare. But what exactly does that mean? That's the other thing. Like people think, like with infrastructure, people think it's roads and bridges. It turns out that it's some woke crap that nobody wants. So when people say, there's 175 billion or a couple hundred billion or whatever going to healthcare, exactly what is it going to? What's being funded? We don't know that.
Right.
A good point.
The devil's in the details. Are they
Yes.
giving vouchers?
I'm going to give you a high level. I'm going to give you
something?
Just real quickly for the listening audience. You're looking at 555 billion for clean energy, 400 billion for childcare and preschools.
What does that mean?
200 billion for child tax credits and income tax credits, 100 billion for housing, 150 billion for housing, 150 billion for home care, 130 billion for affordable care tax credits, 90 billion for equity and other investments, 40 billion for education.
Again, so what's equity? What does that mean?
Well, that's the point. Shaquille, that goes right into the point. Some of these things is very general, and when you say 90 billion for equity, we'll have to go break that down. What is that? And some of these programs might be minority business programs, set aside programs, providing. I have to go back and research it, but the bottom line is that now some other tangible provisions of the bill, which quite frankly, to go to Sasha Starr's point of specifics, one thing that I liked about one aspect of it was capping out-of-cost medical expenses for $2,000 for seniors, capping insulin costs to $35 because the cost of insulin is just skyrocketing, right? Specific things that can help. I can tell you many seniors who haven't saved enough in retirement or haven't had things go their way, they're still in debt, right? Or something like reducing college. Now, loan forgiveness is another point, right? So President Biden did finally say, no, you have to pay your loans, you have to pay your interest, all bets are off. But, perhaps addressing education, reducing the cost of education. So there's so much to do.
But see, once again, there's no attempt being made to reduce the cost of education. If you want cheap education, go to a community college. What these young middle-class children want is they want to go to Harvard or Princeton or Yale or USC or Stanford or any of these Ivy League universities that have $100,000, $200,000 tuition fees, and they want the working class kids to pay for it.
Yeah.
They want somebody else to pay for it. Okay? If you want reduced costs, it's the same thing by the way, with healthcare. If you want reduced costs, there are ways of doing that by collectively bargaining and buying these things or manufacturing things like insulin that doesn't have a patent on it. Okay, there is ways of doing that. We know that because every other country manages to do it. But instead, the idea is, well, we'll just hit the rich. We'll just hit the rich and make them pay more in taxes. Okay, and it's absurd. This is why these.
I'll give you just one absurd rule they have here in the United States. That you cannot order your drugs from Canada. It's against the law.
Right.
Okay. Now the thing is, I ordered some drugs from Canada because it was against the law. But here was the reason why: there was no penalty if you did. But what happens is, in Canada, by the way, the drugs are cheaper than the United States because they negotiate their drugs. But what happens is that this is a law that was passed by our Congress that was supported by the pharmaceutical industry to keep our drug prices high. Now, why they just don't address something like that? Instead, they address all this other stuff rather than address something like that, which, Shaquille, if they addressed a free market solution, drug prices would go down here. But they won't do it.
Nick,
Instead, what they want to do is supplement it with taxes and say, okay, the poor people are going to pay X, Y, Z, and then we're going to tax the rich for the remainder.
Nick and
So
Shaquille,
the
I got a quick
pharmaceutical
question.
industry.
I think
That's
Sasha's got a
exactly
question
the
as well.
point of what's how is the health insurance plan carried in Canada or in Ontario, because everything is carried in Ontario by Ontario Health Insurance Plan, so they have incredible incredible strength, negotiating strength against pharmaceutical companies, because they are ones paying for all these medical care involved, including pharmaceutical products. And of course, they are in a very powerful position to negotiate the best possible prices.
This is incredible, and
Hey, Steve, just a quick question I had for Shaquille. I was actually going to ask Nick the same question because he actually alluded to it earlier, which was that it sounded like he was saying that we needed to go back to a almost like a sharecropping system of agriculture and things of that nature. And it seems to me that we may be the only country that has gotten away from that. And I will admit to not knowing everything about world agriculture, but is that a correct assessment? One, that you're thinking that we may need to go back to sharecropping, and two, that we are one of the few countries that has gotten away from that whole sharecropping mentality.
No,
Well,
I'm not suggesting
I think
that
we
should
have
go to sharecropping at all. What I'm simply saying is that it is unfair for progressives to claim that capitalism is evil whilst allowing big business to lobby government to pass rules to make it uncompetitive for anybody else to compete with them. Okay. That's not free market capitalism. Now, we shouldn't have free market capitalism without any restraint at all, because it doesn't work. But what we should have is free market capitalism where it's appropriate, mostly in the economy. And we should have socialized services paid for communally for the communal benefit of everybody. And that's where the term commonwealth comes from, right? The wealth of the common. And what we see, and it's not just in the United States, it's everywhere, but it's more pronounced in the United States, is what you're seeing is big companies using government rules and regulations and legislation to create favorable conditions to them at the cost of potential competitors and the cost of the everyday person. That is unethical and it's unacceptable. And because of that, well, one of the things that I get from that is I cannot for the life of me understand why anybody would want government to have more power. Because the more power government has, the more susceptible politicians are to being lobbied and to creating laws that hurt the everyday person.
No, I definitely agree with that. And one other thing I was going to add, and it's something that I've not heard any of the people talk about with this $1 trillion bill and everything, is, congressmen, whether they're in the Senate and the House, are some of the most well-paid people that I know and everything. And I don't know what they're doing about their own pay and things, because you never hear them, at least in the old days, you would hear them talking about, freezing their pay, reducing their pay, or doing a number of other things. And I've not even heard that conversation even being had lately. Have you heard that conversation?
No, I never hear that.
Hey, you know what they say in Pawn Stars, Mark? That ain't happening. Okay, so the thing is, they're not going to reduce their pay, and they don't make that much money off their pay. They make it off of investing by finding out where the laws are going. The thing is, for example, and I'll go to the pharmaceuticals. I just spoke against the pharmaceuticals. Okay, but I bought the pharmaceuticals. I bought into BMY and some of the other ones because my belief is that bill will not get passed, that multi-trillion-dollar bill that does have caps that hurts some of the pharmaceuticals I bought into. You see what I mean? So what happens is, and I can't vote on the bill, obviously, that's up to the Senate. But what happens is, this is what's going on, and this is how you get rich in Congress, is you get a feel for where the bill is going like that. And if you think, this is going to get defeated, you load up on BMY stock. And it's considered not insider trading, which is very interesting, because then you could vote. You actually get to vote saying, I'm against this $1 trillion bill. And then all of a sudden your stock goes up like crazy. It's really a weird thing, but there's whole articles written on insider trading in Washington, D.C. And that's all. Insider trading. See, it's like this, Steve. If you tell me, well, that the city of Morrisville is considering buying more properties and you're allocating budgets for that, I start buying land around the properties that you're supposed to do it. But even better, since you have inside information, you buy the land. You see what I mean? And then all of a sudden, the city
and
of
Richard
Morrisville.
Burr, Senator Burr was there was a controversy. He's the outgoing senator.
I know Senator Burr.
Big news about Jeff Jackson dropping out. We never talked about the U.S.
Who?
Senate race in North Carolina. Jeff Jackson, state senator, dropped out with Sherry Beasley now the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party.
That's
We'll
because
find out
people in
whether-
Lithuania don't give a rat's rear, but that's another thing. I mean, they're listening to our show in Lithuania. So I'm going, why do they care about U.S. politics? Well, the macroeconomics they do. Why do they care about the city of Morrisville? I don't think they really do.
I didn't talk about Morrisville today. I'm talking more national.
Or even the state of North Carolina.
Well,
It's like, do we really care what goes on New South
But
Wales?
what they do care about is the COVID pandemic, and we
do care about the COVID pandemic.
And we need to look at the spreading of the variant. It comes down to this, folks. Until I don't know what the vaccination rates are in Lithuania, but vaccination rates in Africa are 8%.
Yeah.
And it's not because we don't have enough vaccine to go out. It's because there is skepticism of people, and the governments are not distributing these vaccines. The infrastructure is not in place, and really, this is concerning, folks.
Yeah.
Wherever you are in the world, it means this is never going to go away. You're going to keep having variants.
I'm betting heavy that the COVID-19 will continue well into 2022, and it's going to get worse, not better. Okay, and I'm betting again on the
I'm calling it DVOC 91 backwards.
What?
DVOC 91.
Yeah, I think you're going to see it worse.
No, my family knew what I was talking about. I was like, oh yeah, they got DVOC 91. What is that?
Yeah,
oh,
but I also agree with your assessment you did earlier. I was listening to it, Steve, that Joe Biden is really the more of a default candidate. In other words, rather than people didn't vote for him, they voted against Trump. And it doesn't matter who stood up, they're going to vote against it, especially the people in the middle. They were just kind of tired of the Donald, and they wanted to see something different. So that's the reason he's in office.
If I were Biden, I think it's in his best interest. Look, he became the president. It was a job he always wanted. He honored the dying wishes of his son and his father, Bill Biden, said, I always want my dad to be president. I think it's time for Biden to just say, hey, it's been a good run. Get on TV like Lyndon Johnson did. Remember that historic moment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where he says, nor will I seek, nor will I accept the party's nomination.
I did a LinkedIn poll on Biden, 8%. 8%. He didn't even make double digits. I was going for him being the nominee in 2024. 8%. 92%
do you think this, if he doesn't run again, think about this, guys. If he formally announces he's not going to run again, perhaps it will give him the political capital he needs to actually get more support from Republicans, knowing that, hey, it's just good old Joe.
Yeah,
we've known him for 60 years.
But again, support for what? If
immigration reform,
if what is being said is actually true, which I don't believe it is, because I know a lot of Republicans. If it's really true that these are these horrible white supremacist, racist people, the deplorables, they're all these, horrific people that are, the scum of America, right, represented by the Republicans. If that's really true, why would they vote for anything the Democrats have? See, that's the thing. When you label people like that and you make your political opponents your enemies where there is absolutely no compromise whatsoever, that they are the most detestable people that ever existed, it doesn't matter what you do after that. You've already made them your enemies.
You mean the deplorables?
Well, you can't go around saying that half of your country are racist and sexist and homophobic and this and that.
Why not?
You can't just keep doing that and expecting that these people are going to say, I'll get on board with this.
We can't.
So what are Republicans going to hang on? What are Republicans going to vote for? Republicans are going to vote for programs that help people who are black but not people that are white, regardless of income. They're going to help very wealthy black families that live in Beverly Hills, but they're not going to help really poor white families that live in some southern states like Arkansas. Is that really what Republicans are going to vote for? Of course not. Why would they?
I'm going to go to Economics Monday, guys.
Yeah, it was time to get ready to go to Economics Monday. Y'all can talk about that over there.
We'll talk
time
about
to close out, right?
Yeah, it's about time to close out and everything. I'm thinking that Shaquille's really going to love the fact that we had a black Santa over at Haytas, since he really is not a big fan of
I don't care what a white man says. Santa Claus is a black man.
I think Santa's an Indian
I don't care what color Santa Claus is, Mark, except for when it must be black at all times in all places, then I have a problem with it.
No, the whole concept of Black Santa is to give people an identity if they're feeling like they're not having representation. That's what the whole idea of Black Santa is.
Because I totally know, like growing up as a child of a Fijian Indian in semi-rural Western Australia, I never saw any Fijian Indian Santa Clauses. I felt so oppressed. I felt so unrepresented. I mean, people have to just grow up and learn to have some bloody courage.
It's been great to see our friend down under. We're going to be back tomorrow to continue but the context today, as we evaluate the presidents of the United States and we look at the WOT, the worst president of the United States, what is that criteria? Is it the economy? Is it peace and prosperity? Is it the administration that they had in place? Is it scandals that brought them down? Who knows, folks? We're going to talk about that tomorrow at 1 o'clock as Mark Lee and I moderate this show for the WOT. But the fact of the matter is this: peace and prosperity today, predictability, certainty, are certainly things that are far from reality. The reality of the situation is this: we don't know in America or around the world what's going to be happening with this pandemic, the variants. We don't know what's going to happen. And we don't know so there's an uncertainty out there that makes us all feel uncomfortable. Here we are, 1 year into the presidency of Joe Biden, and the American people and many people in the world do not feel safer or normal again. And that's a factor that we all, think about it. 1 year ago, we thought we'd be through this. We're going to be beginning 2022 in a few weeks. And here we are.
Not even a few weeks, about a week and a half. It will be that timing. Yep.
Right.
So it's
folks,
coming around.
We'll be back next week. We'll be back next week for another edition, okay? I'll be back tomorrow. I've got to take off now for another meeting.
No problem. Look forward to seeing you on tomorrow. And of course, I'll be heading over to Media Monday, and I think Shaquille is heading over to Economics Monday. By the way, we launched a new show yesterday on the network. So Raven Thistle Live is actually talking about health and fitness and definitely a lot of other things, including sexuality and a number of other things. So that was a show that was launched at 9 o'clock on last night. And
What's the name of the show?
Raven Thistle Live. She actually works with Doug Williams over there at Grambling. So she works with the Doug Williams Center over there in Grambling, Louisiana. So it's Raven Thistle Live.
Doug Williams, a football player.
The football player. Exactly.
Oh, wonderful. Well, guys, thank you all so much. We'll be back next week for another edition of World Edition. God bless each of you, and may the light and love of our hearts always lift out of the darkness. Looking forward to a good show tomorrow. Getting warm for the WOT, the worst of all time.
Worst of all time, President. We're looking forward to it. No vote. No goat. The vote.